Hello and welcome to Business India with me Tarun. If you use a mobile phone or your near and dear use a mobile phone, then what we are telling you today is serious. You must hold the cell phone away from your body to as much as the extent that it is possible. You must use a headset, whether wired or Bluetooth, to keep the handset away from your head. Do not press the phone handset against your head. Radio frequency energy is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source. So, you should not rather press the handset on your head. Now, limit the length of mobile calls. This is not what we are saying. This is what the government of India's telecom department has issued as precautionary guidelines. The guidelines further states that use text as compared to voice calls whenever possible. If the radio signal is weak, a mobile phone will increase its transmission power, find a strong signal and avoid movement. So, basically you use your phone where reception is good and you get all towers or say maximum towers rather than when the reach is low. Let the call connect before you put the handset on your ear or start speaking and listening. A mobile phone first makes communication at a higher power and then reduces the power to adequate level. More power is radiated during call connecting time. If you have a choice, use a landline or wired phone, not a mobile phone. People having active medical implants, like many people have heart implants, valves, and such things, should preferably keep the cell phone at least 15 centimeters away from the implant. This is a very important precautionary measure. While purchasing a mobile handset, you must check the SAR value of the mobile phone. It can be searched on the internet if you just look up your model number and make. Now, since this advice is given by the government of India's Department of Telecom themselves, let us this issue one by one with an eminent panel of guests. This includes Virag Gupta, cyber law expert and telecom expert, Dr. Mahesh Uppal, Director Comfirst India, joins us from Faridabad, Anil Kumar, Secretary Telecom Watchdog, and Rajan S. Matthew, Director General COAI. I will first start with Rajan Matthew and would request him to make his opening comments on what would be his message to the people of India, given that these precautionary measures are issued by the Department of Telecom themselves.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity, and let me first make the distinction between the use of the handset as well as what people mostly fear is the EMF emissions from the mobile towers.
Yes.
So the precautionary guidelines that you have referred to are given for the handsets and they are appropriate. It is like any other thing. When you are driving a car, there are certain precautions and guidelines that you take, and so safe driving of a vehicle requires certain precautions. So clearly those precautions for the handsets are appropriate if there's concern. But again, the critical point to be remembered is that the SAR value, the safety norms established by the government, ensure that the use of handsets do not cause any health hazards to the user. So that being separated from the cell towers, again the government has made it clear that any EMF emissions from the cell towers is nothing to be worried about.
Okay, I take your point. I am going across to my fellow panelist, Mr. Anil Kumar, Secretary of Telecom Watchdog, for his opening comments on the guidelines issued by the Department of Telecom.
Yes, I fully agree with Mr. Matthew on the handset part. The handset part, he says the government has given guidelines, but on the tower side also the government has given guidelines, but that is very diluted one. The actual recommendation of the committee which went abroad and had discussions with the WHO and all that, after they came back they made a recommendation in 2012. In 2012 they made a recommendation saying that school should not be near to the tower, hospital should not be near to the tower, and they made some kind of specific observations. They said that the roof should be locked where the towers are installed. They said that exclusion zones should be there where there should not be anything, residential area and all that. They also specified safe radial distance, at what distance the residences can be there. For example, they had made a recommendation that if 6 antennas are installed on one particular tower in one particular direction, the distance is safe distance is 55 meters. But if there are 12 antennas in one particular direction, the safe distance is 75 meters. So, the tower radiation, Mr. Matthew says, has got nothing, and government has declared it all well, everything is okay, but that is not true. So, government has diluted committee's recommendation, and under pressure from the industry, they made some recommendations, and that has become the guidelines now for the entire industry. For example, now government says that you can get it tested. How much fees has to be paid? 5,000. If I have to get it tested, I have to make call to TCIL and tell them, please get my rooftop tower tested, or my neighbors, this rooftop tower is emitting, I am suspecting, get it tested. How much I have to pay? I have to pay 5,000 rupees fees. I have to wait for them, and they will come and inspect it. But by that time, they would also, the operator would already know that some testing will be happening in this area, and then they will try to adjust the power.
So very profound comments made by Anil Kumar on this issue. I am going across to Mahesh Uppal. He is Director of ComFirst India. Mr. Uppal, we would like to understand from you and also take your opening comments on this issue, that if the Department of Telecom issues these kind of precautionary guidelines, it sure is an issue of some concern that people should take precaution when they use mobiles in their day-to-day lives.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it is nobody's case that you should not take precautions. I think just because mobile radiations are by and large safe doesn't mean that you should continue to expose yourself to incessant amounts of radiation, and that is the point that is being made. I think the main issue is that a considered decision has been taken by the government to come up with a set of guidelines. These guidelines compare with the best in the world. They are at least 10 times more strict than the ones being followed, say, in the US and in many countries, including Russia. So I think we have to draw a line somewhere. I think we have to keep all this stuff in perspective. Yes, there is no doubt that both the mobile tower and the mobile handset both generate radiation. But I think we have to understand under what circumstances this radiation is harmful and at what power it is harmful. Now it is well known, and I by sheer chance happen to also be a chemist, that there is a certain energy level beyond before which any kind of a chemical bond can be broken. In other words, any kind of molecular transformation cannot take place with the kind of energy levels that we are talking about from mobile towers or from handsets. So we need to be careful. Yes, so one is that this level of radiation is ultra safe. However, it is true that for the last, it's only in the last 40 years or so that we have, mankind in general has been exposed to this level of radiation. So a certain amount of care, a certain amount of looking over your shoulder is a good idea.
Okay, that's a good point.
And it is very sensible that the government as well as others are coming up with sensible guidelines.
Okay.
And but these are not to scare you, but get you to be conscious of potential risks.
I take your point.
And I think before we deal with those risks, we have to actually establish whether these risks have actually occurred in real life, whether there are people suffering because of this. And I think the evidence there is virtually non-existent.
Okay, thank you,
That
Mr.
We do not have
thank you,
sufficient
Mr. Uppal. We
evidence
coming back to you in a
of-
bit. I'm going across to Virag Gupta. He is a cyber law expert and a telecom expert. Virag, I would like to ask you at the outset. The government has laws to mandate that you wear a seat belt, that you wear a helmet when you are driving a car or a bike. Of course, the government can't have laws for the use of mobile phone. They can only have advisories. Do you think enough is being done in this regard, and what is your overall feeling by the guidelines issued by the Department of Telecom?
Like the car, here the guidelines are applicable to the mobile companies and the telecom tower companies. Now we can identify all the issues in the four heads. Number one is guidelines. Guidelines are there. Those guidelines are prescribed in the telecom license, also in the para 24.1. Now the second comes the disclosure, whether the transparency is there, and the third is monitoring, and fourth is action. So I think government has only given the guidelines, and there is an office memorandum 27 February 2014. In that office memorandum also there is provision for one web portal, and that web portal is also almost non-functional. So basically what is happening, that all the guidelines and norms are there, but those are not properly disclosed by the mobile companies. Since there is no disclosure, there is no monitoring. Even the CAG has observed that minimum 10% that check is not being done by the government agencies and the term. So there is, where the question of any action, there is provision that if these guidelines are not complied by the companies, then there is provision for 5 to 10 lakh rupees penalty. And finally we ask the customers that please tell where is the radiation, where is the any loss. There was a petition in the Rajasthan High Court where they came to the court with all the facts and saying that 2 brothers suffered from the cancer because of this radiation. And especially when the call drop is there, and this is scientifically proved, when the call drop is there, when the mobile tower is not properly working, then there are chances of more radiation.
I take your point.
So
I'm going across to, I'll come back to you,
cold
Mr.
drink.
Gupta. I'm going across to Mr. Matthews
Yes.
of the COAI. Mr. Matthew, I would want to ask you this. The guideline number 1 says that you have to keep telephones or mobile phones away from your body as possible. I mean, as whenever possible, keep it away. Now there is a tendency that a lot of people would sleep with mobile phones on their beds. I mean, it's natural to have them in your pockets while you go to sleep. I mean, this is what a lifestyle or an urban lifestyle that has developed. What is your advice as somebody who represents the industry, that how seriously should or responsibly should the users use their mobiles? Because this is, say, the guideline number 1 issued by the DOT. What's your message to the people?
So first of all, let me just clarify a few points that have been raised already. I think there's a bit of misinformation both from the legal side as well as from the gentleman who said he is from the Telecom Watch. First of all, these are just not guidelines. These are regulations that are built in from the TRAI and the DOT. There are significant penalties imposed on operators for non-compliance. There is testing. The TEC has documented evidence of testing of 10% or more of the towers on a random basis without any information. So all of this is there. So I think this misinformation that is coming up in this show needs to be corrected. But let me go to the point that you are raising, which basically says, yes, those guidelines, if there is a concern, yes, of course, please follow the guidelines. The handsets are something that you have control over. Use it wisely, use it properly. As it is today, most of the people who use it are using it for data services. And most of the people today are not putting it here, they're putting it down here, they're using their fingers, they're using buds and all of this. So I think, yes, those are good precautions. If you have any concern, please follow those. But please also understand that the SAR guidelines are indicated so that even when you use it reasonably and with the appropriate precautions, they have absolutely no impact on your health. That has been established world over. So in India, we have even safer guidelines than in America or in Europe for that matter. So we should feel from a consumer perspective safe based on the government's safety norms that we are observing in India.
Mr. Matthew, one question I would like to ask you. The guideline number 10 advises people to check the SAR of the mobile phone before they buy it. Is it built into the system and the regulations that one doesn't need to check because the government will only permit a certain quality of phones to be sold, or do you think one should check it? What's your advice to the people?
My advice to the people is absolutely you must check the SAR either by reference to the material provided in the handsets or on the website. Why? Because there is any number of cheap handsets being imported into the country without proper checks and balances, and they are being flooded into the country. People, because of price sensitivity, are buying these handsets which are not compliant with these SAR guidelines. So the caution to the consumer is please check the handsets, check who's manufacturing it, please rely on good branded phones, check the SAR values, and please use those that are in compliance and are manufactured according to these guidelines and safety norms.
Okay, that's a good point. I'm going across to Anil Kumar, Secretary Telecom Watchdog. Anil Kumar, Mr. Matthew made a very important point that due to a lot of tendency of people, or even the purchasing power is low of many people, they go for cheap handsets whose SAR values may be more. How big a problem do you think this is currently in our country?
I think SAR of handset is generally all right. Now worldwide people are aware that in India only this value is acceptable. If something is found to be wrong, the whole consignment will be turned out. So turned away.
The consignment will be rejected?
Yes, rejected. So this is what the apprehension is all over world. So whatever handsets are being imported, they are generally believed to be within the range. So need not worry about that. Main problem comes from the tower signal. The moment that there is a weak tower signal, generally which is the case these days, so the emission the handset tries to catch the signal. It radiates and operates at higher power. So that is where the problem is, where the people consumers should be careful. They should not be using the handset for longer time when the signal is weak. So they should wait when for a place where signal is good, there only they should try to speak.
That's an important point. I'm going across to Dr. Mahesh Uppal, Director Comfirst India, and take his views on this issue.
Yes, I think the truth is that in our country there is a large number of handsets which do get smuggled, which are sold illegally, and there is a good chance that for them to be attractive in price, people may actually be compromising on quality. So I think the point that we should be careful and we should examine the documentation or the specifications of your phone is a valid point. Whether this is practical in India is a different point, because the people who are often price sensitive are often, in many cases, also not very technically savvy and may not be able to make head or tail of the SAR rate. But be that as it may, there can be no doubt in my mind that we cannot take all handsets on faith, especially the ones which are not branded, because there is an issue.
Okay.
As far as the towers are concerned, yes, like we have already said, there is an issue, and that is being addressed, and that is addressed by actually specifying what levels you can radiate on. There is some level of monitoring that is going on, etc. Maybe that can be improved. Maybe there are loopholes, whatever. That's a different point. But I think the crucial point is that we are doing far better in regulatory terms than our peers, than indeed countries which are way ahead of us, such as the US or most of Europe, etc., etc.
That's a very
So
good
I
point
think,
made by
it's
Uppal,
important
Mr. Uppal.
not to panic.
Okay. Mr. Uppal, very good point that we are doing
So
better.
we can't afford to panic, but we
can't
need to
afford
address
panic,
issues.
and we are doing better than our peers in the
Yeah.
world. Of course, that's something to be happy about, that our guidelines are indeed better. I'm going across to Virag Gupta, cyber law expert. Virag Gupta, I would want to know, since a lot of Indian manufacturers or so-called manufacturers basically do container imports with their brands and names stamped from countries abroad. These mobile phones come in container as imports and are distributed in the country. Do you think there are even legal checks in the whole legal framework to not allow a certain quality of handsets to be sold in the country? Or do you think that they still pass through and there is something that needs to be done in this area?
What needs to be done, that the directions of the telecom TRAI and the other authorities should be incorporated as law by the DGFT, so that at the time of import you can only have check at the time of import, like others items you are testing in the port. So those things can be ensured either by the certificate from the manufacturer or the random check. But I am going to the point of Mr. Matthew. What he has said, that all the compliances are being done by the telecom companies. I am reading clause number 7 of the office memorandum issued by the Ministry of Communication. It says, Department of Telecom will create national EMF web portal to provide public access to the status of compliance of the prescribed EMF norms of all BTS mobile towers in the country and related relevant information. Now EMF here applies for the electromagnetic field. Now I had checked this website. Now there are no disclosure at all. Now unless there are disclosure, and then in the same office memorandum, as per the para 2, there is a provision for penalty of 5 lakh rupees to 10 lakh rupees. So will Mr. Matthew explain that how many times penalty has been imposed to the different telecom companies for the radiation in violation of the office memorandum issued by the government?
Okay, that's an important point. I'm going across to Mr. Matthews. Now, I'm going to ask two questions to Mr. Matthews, and of course, he can answer the question that Mr. Gupta raised. We'll clear some myths, Mr. Matthew, as well as ask questions. The myths and facts section of the Department of Telecom says mobile phones cause headache. The DOT says it is a myth. Mobile phones do not cause headaches. There is no scientific evidence. So they have cleared this point. Second, it says the myth is it is safer using a mobile phone in a car as the car shields from radiation. The DOT says it is a myth. The RF radiation is increased by mobile handsets when used in a car to overcome the shielding. So these are myths which the DOT also clears, but there are 2 points that the DOT is also making. They are saying that as far as possible, buy a Bluetooth or a wired headset and use your phone. And second, it says do not press the phone on your head. Radio frequency energy is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source. Now, what is your message to the people? Because a common reader, when he reads these guidelines, may be confused. They say once there is no headache, and second they are saying that don't press the phone to your head. How would you explain this as somebody who represents the industry?
So first of all, with regard to Mr. Gupta saying that there is no portal, the portal has been in operation, it hasn't been made available to the public. Why? Because the DOT and the TEC is testing it to make sure that it is in compliance with the guidelines. So that is going to be inaugurated shortly by the DOT Secretary and the Honorable Minister. To say that it's not there is not true. He is not aware of all of the things that go on in the DOT and in the industry. So that is a clarification. Now coming to this issue of myths and realities, I think what the DOT is trying to say is that listen, the handsets that are manufactured and are compliant with the SAR values are absolutely safe for use, or exercise the appropriate cautions if you are concerned. So a person who has a car and is afraid of driving at 45 miles because of conditions may choose to drive at 35. But that is an individual choice. It does not mean that the car is unsafe. So this is the point. They're saying is that the handset is safe. If there is a concern, if you are hypersensitive to EMF. Some people are, and if you do have concerns, please observe the appropriate safety norms. So whether you're in a car, whether you're outside of a car, whether you press it to your head, the SAR value ensures that under normal use it is safe. 8 high courts of this country, in response to PILs, and Mr. Gupta should be aware of it as a legal person, have all looked at the issue of handsets and mobile towers and categorically, unanimously agreed that there is no scientific evidence to show that there is any health hazard emanating from the use of handsets or mobile towers. Please have Mr. Gupta check those legal facts.
Okay, that's a good point made
Mr.
by
Matthew, I would like to reply to Mr. Matthews both the observation.
Okay, please do.
Number one, I have never said that the web portal is not operational. I said that web portal is operational, but the necessary disclosures are not done as required by the office memorandum. Second, I asked the question that he can give me the details that how many times telecom companies are penalized as per the office memorandum, wherein the provision is there for the penalty of 5 lakh rupees to 10 lakh rupees. Regarding 8 high courts, we must understand that most of the PILs are filed by those persons who don't know about the technicalities, and High Court have rejected or dismissed or disposed on the basis that sufficient material has not been given. But Supreme Court has issued the notice.
Mr. Gupta, we've
Supreme
taken
Court
your
has
point.
decided the matter.
Absolutely wrong.
Supreme Court has
Please
issued the
don't
notice.
misinform the public. Please don't misinform the public. Read these deliberations and
Supreme Court
and
next
the
date.
outcomes of the honorable. You are doing a disservice to the High Courts.
No,
Please
no,
read those
no.
opinions
I am
very carefully.
telling you facts.
Substantial evidence was
Please.
supported and provided
Please.
in all of these.
Please.
These PILs were
Mr.
not
Matthew,
filed
Supreme Court has
by
issued the
people who
notice
were
or not?
unaware of
Okay,
the
this
scientific facts.
disagreement can go on, but actually we are out of time on this episode. We'll continue this discussion in our next episode of Business India.
Government has to
thank
file
you,
reply
thank
before
you,
the
Mr.
Supreme
Gupta.
Court.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this discussion today. We'll come back to you on this discussion. We continue it in our series on the mobile issue in the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Business India. Thank you.